Hello lovely people, Thyworm here with a build guide for Last Epoch Patch 0.8.3c. I made a lazy summoner, meaning you don't have to press a single button. You can find the written guide, which is this script, on the forum. The build is available in the Last Epoch build planner and you can see the description for all of the links. If you enjoy content like this, consider liking or subscribing. It helps out a ton and I really appreciate it. Let's start with the build philosophy. This build is an attempt to see how well the permanent minions work in Last Epoch these days on a summoner. The devs specifically stated in the patch notes that they wanted to push the archetype of a summoner with permanent minions. So I basically took that to the extreme and what you end up with you can see over here. Lo and behold, some of the footage. And if you're thinking that's really not all that impressive, you are correct. But it's not bad either. I'm using 5 minion skills and made all the minions permanent, which means for example I don't have a movement skill. It also means you have severely limited number of minions because you need to fit in the abomination, which ultimately hurts DPS quite a bit. Still, I managed to clear several empowered timelines with 100 corruption and I made it all the way to level 95. The build is decent doing the Monolith. You see some empowered timelines in the footage and you can just run to the target and the minions kill everyone along the way. It is a very lazy playstyle. You can play with one hand and the only time you need to do anything is when minions die. This doesn't happen very often because I made the minions rather tanky. Boss damage, single target is definitely not amazing, but how often are you killing bosses anyway? So what do you need in terms of stats? Here's the wish list. In terms of defenses, make sure to get res capped of course and get 100% crit avoidance. The blessings in the Monolith can help a lot here. You want a bit of health and I'm using a shield with 45% chance to block, which mitigates quite a bit of damage. Mana isn't an issue because you're not casting anything after all. Most important are your minion stats of course. Give them health, damage and some dodge. I have a bit of a fire theme going, so I got some fire damage idols. And I went with crit and crit multiplier for the damage scaling. Let's look at the skill specializations and the skills that we're using. I will make a few highlights in this skills section, but you can see everything in detail in the build planner. I'm starting with Assemble Abomination because he is the reason we're making other skill choices as well. Because we're going with a permanent minion build, we need to make our Abomination not decay anymore. The node Age of Undeath does that for you, but it has quite a few limitations. Your abomination can only be built from skeletons and mages, and if you control 6 or more skeletons or mages, the abomination starts decaying again and it dies. At first, I tried building the abomination as a damage dealer, but eventually I settled on him as a tank. I'm taking leech and health, and the result is a very healthy tanky boy that easily tanks bosses and keeps aggro away from you and the other damage dealing minions. On to Summon Skeletal Mage. Remember, we can only have 5 skeletons and mages in total, so I'm going with the node here that gives me a single big mage, the Archmage. In the bottom, Cellar Mortis and Grey Merchant give them a lot of crit and crit multi, and I'm turning them into Fire Mages to skill with my minion fire damage idols. The Fire Archmage has 100% crit by the way. Then the regular skeletons, you need to make sure you have no more than 4 of these, and there are many ways to get additional skeletons by using the skill tree or by using passives or by using gear. Dread Phalanx is a mandatory node here to make the minions stronger and cut their numbers in half. I am turning the skeletons into archers to scale with my unique wand. I give them fire arrows to scale with the idols, and I give them all the crit I can, and they're almost crit capped by now. It is around 80% crit. The rest is mostly attack speed and more damage multipliers. Let's look at the Bone Golem. Once again a fire minion. I'm taking pretty much every fire node in the book here, which means the golem has a big fire aura and I found it does a good job in cleaning up bigger groups of enemies. It's almost always up and it skills again with the fire damage and idols. Finally we have Summon Wraith. Making these permanent is very questionable, but I wanted to stick to the theme so we did it. This means you can only have 2 of these. I tried to get plus max wraiths, but the twin spirits node so far overrides everything, so I think there is no way you can get more than 2. Only 2 wraiths, that isn't much of course, but I guess at least they're permanent. I skill crit in the bottom left of the tree, which works well. I went once again with fire using flame wraith, and for what is worth, these wraiths are about as powerful as regular skeleton archers. It's time to look at the passives. I'll be doing the same thing here, I will just highlight a few interesting decisions. In the base tree, you can get a lot of resistances, and early on I suggest you take those. Unnatural preservation and forbidden knowledge give a lot of freedom in your gear. In the end game, the blessings give you resistances, and you can spec out of these nodes and invest in health. Soul Aegis seems too good to not take, giving minions 300 flat armor at level 100. In the Necromancer tree, I take Risen Army for attack and cast speed. I'm taking Unbound Necromancy and Tyrant's Legion in the passive tree to balance the number of skeletons. 5 out of 5 effigies is a great node for this build. It is a lifesaver as well, because at low life you have a chance to eat a minion and heal to full, which saved my runs quite a few times already. Because I'm scaling crit and crit multi, you're taking everything in the top right as well. You take Rite of Undeath, which gives your minions a lot of damage and you a lot of res. Cling to Life works well for your minion tankiness. Note that I'm not taking Veins of Malice, because we're not casting any skills usually, as this is a very passive build. Then, also very important, gear. I've been playing the new patch a lot, so my gear is really decent. I chose to get a lot of base crit for the skeletons on my gear in the helmet and the chest, and you then use minion crit multipliers to scale this damage. So I have 2 turquoise rings and the unique amulet Death Rattle, giving you another 97% minion crit multiplier in my case. It makes your minions take more damage, but I found that it's not too bad actually. Most other items just have minion stats, intelligence or player health on them. I'm still also using the unique wand, the Reach of the Grave, which synergizes well with the skeletons. For idols, make sure you have at least one idol that grants Mark for Death on minion hit. Even at 4% chance, this is awesome, it lowers the resistances of the enemies. I run a combination of base crit idols and minion fire damage idols, and I have a bit of cooldown recovery for the minions as well. For blessings, I am pretty much taking all the resistance blessings because I don't want to deal with resistances. There are some really great minion blessings as well, but they're in the same pool as the crit avoidance one or the resistance one, for example, and I prefer once again to not have to deal with too many defensive restrictions. I have one endgame loot filter that is pretty strict, but it does have everything you need. I will attach it to the forum post, you can see the link in the description. Talking about leveling, it's super easy. I feel minions do well across the campaign and they scale decently into the endgame as well. So let's talk a bit about the Monolith and the modifiers to take. Generally, I don't mind giving enemies a bunch of damage or some health. All the things like chill and slow on hit are fine. Crit is fine too. It might kill your minions, but it won't kill you because you are crit immune. I would not give enemies dodge or resistances, and definitely don't give them crit immunity because that ruins our build since we're crit scaling. And that brings us to the playstyle of the build. Here's the build in action, although it's not much action. It is a lazy summoner, it's extremely passive. You only need to resummon every now and then and dodge some stuff. The lack of a movement skill ability can get you killed if you're not careful and if you get cornered, but that rarely happened to me. In boss fights, especially Herod, we have enough life to survive a few ticks in the blizzards. No movement skill slows down the build, of course, but we're staying with the theme at least. Apart from this, there's really not that much to the build. It is fairly straightforward. I mean, let's be clear, it is not as strong as it could be, for sure. And my next project will be turning these permanent minions into temporary ones, adding a movement skill and make hopefully a much more attractive and active summoner that should do a lot more damage. But you know, if you enjoy playstyle like this, which is super lazy and passive, then this might be the build for you. I had a lot of fun playing it actually. And I had a lot of fun creating this build all the way from start to finish, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a like, toss a sub to the channel, and finally, thanks for watching. See you soon, love you all, bye bye.